All right, so let's start with question number one for chapters 11 through 15. So, if the provider documents chronic kidney disease stage 5 and ESRD, what codes are we going to report? So, from a testing perspective, okay, if we know our ICD-10 guidelines or we know that, this is a topic that is covered in your guidelines, then you don't even really have to go to your index. So if everybody wants to flip to the guidelines for the urinary system, so that's going to be your chapter 14. And then at the very beginning of chapter 14, number one, it has a sentence, the very last sentence, it's kind of a standalone sentence underneath number one, stages of CKD. It states that if we have CKD and ESRD documented, what code are we going to assign? Yep. So we've got in 18.6 only. So we only document, or we not only document, we only code the ESRD because we're going to basically absorb that chronic kidney disease diagnosis into that end stage renal disease. Okay. So that way you don't have to start looking at codes and questions. Okay. So if you are familiar enough with your guidelines, then you may not remember exactly what it is that it says, but you may remember that, hey, there's something in there that tells me what I need to do. And then that should trigger you to go to your guidelines and find that without having to fumble through all of the codes, try to decide, because back in your tabular, there's not necessarily a note. You can always make a note if you want to. But currently, the way that the books are laid out, there's not a note specific to a scenario like this. Any questions on that one? Okay. Let's take a look at number two. So number two, we're looking at a female patient that has osteoarthritis localized in the left hip joint due to senile osteoporosis. So from, again, a testing perspective, we can rule out two, right? We have two with M16.7, and then we have two with M16.12. So let's go take a look at M16.7 versus M16.12 and decide which one should we use. So M16.7, that one is other unilateral secondary osteoarthritis of the hip. And then M16.12 is unilateral primary osteoarthritis of the hip. So which one do you think we should use? M16.7 or M16.12? Yep, 0.12. So we're going to rule out A and D. Okay. Then we just need to decide, do we need M81.8 or M81.6? So M81.8 is other osteoporosis without a current pathological fracture. And then M81.6 is localized osteoporosis. So which one should we choose? M81.8 or M81.6? Oh, hang on. Hang on. Hang on. I think I spoke wrong. Let me reread the first ones here because M81.6 and M81.8 don't sound right. So let's go back and look at our first code here real quick because I said 0.12, but I think I'm second guessing myself now. M80, no, M16.12. Let me go back and read the descriptions. M16.12 is unilateral primary osteoarthrosis. So we're not going, or osteoarthritis. So we're not going to use primary, right? Because it's due to senile osteoporosis. So we should be using M86.7. Sorry, that's my bad. I got a little happy with my answer there. So now we need to decide, do we need M16.12 as well, or should we only code M81.0? Sorry if I confused you on that. That was totally my bad. Been a long day on this end. So M16.7 should be what we use, right? So we know we need M81.0. So are we saying M81.0 only for those that have answered in the chat M81.0, or are we saying that we need to, somebody wants to come off mute, you guys are more than welcome to. Okay, yep. So we should only code the M18 point, sorry, the M81.0. My brain today is not processing numbers. So M16.7 is the secondary osteoarthritis. Okay. And then the M81.0 is going to be for the age-related osteoporosis, which is the senile osteoporosis. So we should only code the M81.0 for the senile osteoporosis, and then the M16.7. Any questions? Sorry if I confused anybody on that one. Like I said, I got a little ahead of myself and got a little. So we would not use the M16.12 because it is not a primary osteoarthritis. It is a secondary because it's due to the senile osteoporosis. Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay. Let's do number 3. A patient is having surgery to repair a recurrent left inguinal hernia without obstruction. So from a testing perspective, even though we don't have 2 answers that have the exact same answer, right? The exact same codes, we have 2 that are very close to each other, and we have 2 that are close and then 2 that are close. So let's go to the K40.20 and K40.21. So we have a K40.20 and 21 are bilateral inguinal hernias without obstruction. One is recurrent, one is not specified as recurrent. So do we think that's what we're going to use? Do we think we want to confirm 20 or 21, or do we want to rule out 20 and 21? So 20 and 21 are stating that they're bilateral, but here we only have left. So we want to rule out the 20 and 21. So then let's go to the K40.90 and 91. So they're both, again, unilateral. So that gives us what we need because it's left. And then it's without obstruction or gangrene. And then it is specified as recurrent. So we want to use K40.91. Okay. Any questions on that one? Perfect. Number 4, what ICD-10-CM codes are going to be reported on the maternal record for a delivery of triplets that are all live born at 32 weeks pregnancy? So we can rule out 2 very quickly because we know if we have a pregnancy chart, then we should always have a chapter 15 code listed first, right? If our chapter 15 code is listed second, then we know that those are incorrect. So B and C are out of the question. And then I'll teach you guys a trick. Okay. So let's go look at the Z3A.32. Okay. I'm going to show you guys a little trick. So Z3A.32. So our Z3A.32 code, that's going to be for our weeks of gestation, right? Does anybody see a correlation with the weeks of pregnancy and the fourth and fifth digits of your codes? So in this case, they are 32 weeks pregnant. So our code is Z3A.32. So 32 and 32. So technically, if you remember that trick, you don't even have to open your ICD-10 book in the testing perspective, because we know if we have a chapter 15 code and we are pregnant, then we have to have our chapter 15 code listed first. And then if we remember our trick, 32 weeks is 0.32. Without even cracking open your book, you've got your answer. Because I know chapter 15, or not, yeah, I know chapter 15 codes tend to stress some people out, and rightfully so, because the pregnancy coding and all of that from scratch can get a little intense. Okay. But this is the beauty of, they actually thought some things through when they created the code set, so that we're not going to have to think too much into it if you have a scenario like this. Okay. Any questions? Z3A is going to be after Z36. Why Z3A is between 36 and 37, I don't know. I wish I could give some insight into that one. But the Z3A, if you have the 2024 edition of the AAPC, it's on page 1318. I know there's a couple of them where it's got those A's and B's and all of that. Migraines is another one where it's kind of thrown in the middle of your code set. So that's another reason why it's nice to know this trick and that tip. Okay. Any other questions that you guys can think of? Okay. To number 5. So a patient was referred to the radiology department for chronic low back pain. The radiologist, or the radiology report, indicated that there was no marrow abnormality identified and the conus medullaris was unremarkable. Additional findings include L4, L5. There's minor diffusely bulging annulus at L4, L5. The small focal disc bulge is seen in a far lateral position at the left L4, L5 within the neural foramen. No definite encroachment on the existing nerve at this site is seen. No significant spinal stenosis is identified. And then for L5S1, there is a diffusely bulging annulus at L5S1 with a small focal disc bulge centrally at the level. There is minor disc desiccation and disc space narrowing at L5S1. There's no significant spinal stenosis that's seen at L5S1. And the diagnosis is major degenerative disc disease at L4, L5, and L5S1 as described. So we have 3 that have M51.36, but we have 2 that have M51.37. Okay, so since those are right next to each other, let's go take a look at those codes. So M51.36 and M51.37. So M51.36 is other intervertebral disc degeneration at the lumbar region. And then 37 is other intervertebral disc degeneration at the lumbosacral region. So do we need one of those or do we need both? Because we have minor degenerative disc disease at L4, L5. So there's our lumbar region, right? So the M51.36 should be what we use for that one. And then the L5, or yeah, the L5S1, that is known as the lumbosacral region. So we should use that one also. Okay. So we should use letter A as our correct answer. And then we would not code the chronic low back pain because that chronic low back pain is going to be a sign or symptom of that degenerative disc disease. Make sense? Any questions? You guys are a quiet group tonight. We're gonna fly through them if y'all don't have any questions. Okay. Let's look at number 6. So a 55-year-old has developed a pressure ulcer on her right hip. The base of the ulcer is covered in eschar, and the provider documents that the stage of the ulcer cannot be determined. So, what are your guys' thoughts? Which ones do you want to look at first? Because again, even though there's not two that are identical in your options, then there are two that are close and then two that are close. So I'm going to go to the L89.219 just because that is first numerically, and that's where my brain is at today. So the 210 and the 219, we have L89.210 is pressure ulcer of the right hip that is unstageable. And then L89.219, which is pressure ulcer of the right hip, unspecified stage. So if the stage of the ulcer cannot be determined, is it going to be considered an unspecified stage, or should we consider it an unstageable? Does everybody know the difference between the two?
I do not.
Okay. So if it's in this case, they cannot determine, that's not going to be unspecified. Unspecified is going to be if they just say that there's a pressure ulcer present and they don't tell us any more details. It's just an unspecified diagnosis, right? But they tried to determine, but because it's covered in eschar, which is like that scar tissue, then since it is covered in that, they are clinically unable to determine it. Therefore, it is going to be an unstageable. So unstageable means that we are trying to figure out what it is, but we're unable to determine it. Unspecified, like I said, is just they tell us that a pressure ulcer is present and then they leave it at that. Make sense? Any other questions on that one?
Nope. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And then your 319 and your 310, those are just going to be for different anatomic locations. So we just need to make sure that we are in the correct anatomic location, which was the 210, because that was for the hip. The 31 is going to be for the buttock. Okay. Any other questions on that one? Perfect. Number 7, a woman with a long history of rectocele has perineal scarring with multiple episiotomies and has developed a rectovaginal fistula with perineal body relaxation. She has a transperineal repair with perineal body reconstruction and plication of the levator muscles to correct these conditions. So if you have a question like this, okay, first thing we need to do is look at what are they asking. So they're asking us for ICD-10 codes. So we just need to put these repairs out of our mind, right? Because the repairs are going to be reported with our CPT codes. So just kind of out of sight, out of mind, the repairs. We're only looking at the conditions, right? So since we are only looking at the conditions, we can do a couple of things, okay? We have two that have N81.6, and then we have two that have N82.5. So let's go take a look at N81.6. And N81.6 is for a rectocele, and then our inclusion notes say that it's a prolapse of the posterior vaginal wall. So do we think that our N81.6 is our code? Does that sound like what we have here?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go look at the N82.5 and see if that more closely matches what we're looking at.
Probably so.
Okay. No, you're fine. You're fine. I know sometimes you might think that it is, and then you go look at the other one and you're like, oh, that's even better. So that's why I always like to say, don't always just jump at the first code that you see. Okay. Especially in CPT, because you think it might match what you're doing, but you might be missing a small little detail that you didn't realize you were missing until you look at another code. So you're in 82.5 is going to be the female genital tract to skin fistula. So N81.6 is a rectocele or the posterior vaginal wall, whereas your N82.5 is going to be the genital tract to the skin. So that's basically what this rectal vaginal fistula is it's not um hang on. Yes. Also because hang on. We're not going to use N81.6. Sorry, my thought process was a little slow there for a second. We're not going to code N81.6 because it's a history of a rectocele. The rectocele is not a current condition. Does that part make sense now? So even though they say
Yeah.
our rectocele word is here, right? It's a history of it. So we're not going to use that. Okay. So then we know that the N82.5 is our code that we need for the female genital tract to skin fistula. And then it's not in any of the others. Sorry, I was looking to double check that too. So since that one's not in any of the others, then we know that that's it. Now, if we are still kind of doubting ourselves, we can go ahead and look at the N90.89 and just use that for confirmation. Again, that's you don't have to if you're confident with that N82.5, but that N90.89 is going to be for an other specified non-inflammatory disorder of the vulva and the perineum. So in this case, that's not really going to give us a whole lot of clarification because we'd have to go look to see if it fell underneath any of the others before we can use the others. But we know it's not D or A because of that N81.6, right? So then again, if you're still not 100% sure on the N82.5, you can go to your N82.3 and see if that's what we need, which our N82.3 is the fistula of the vagina to large intestine. And we can say that that's not it either. So sometimes they might be a little tricky, but if you're still not 100% confident, you can use all of the others to rule it out and tell you that this is for sure our answer. Okay. Any questions? on that part.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So it's a little off subject, but you know how when you're rolling out codes and you on your computer you're like lining them out?
Hmm.
I'm having a hard time with during the exam since you can't use any pencils or anything. When
Hmm.
there's questions with like seven codes, I'm having
Hmm.
a hard time when I'm going through the process of elimination of like mentally like drawing the lines through those codes. Do you have
Yeah.
any suggestions for that?
So if it's like question number 10, where you've got multiple of them,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that you can do is there is a notepad built into the exam platform. And so what you
Oh.
can do is you can say A, B, C, D, right? And then if you
Mm-hmm.
know that you need to rule out B, instead of, crossing out the way that I'm doing it here, you can just put an
Mm-hmm.
X. And then if
Oh,
you know you're ruling
okay.
out D, put an X. And then that way that's visually, because trust me, I know I'm a visual person too. When I took
Okay.
my E&M exam back in May, that was the first time I'd taken one on like the software, like on the computer, and I had to
Mm-hmm.
do this because my brain needed that visual reminder of do not choose B. I
Yeah.
ruled that
By the
out
time I,
and not having to
yeah,
remember did I say B was a possibility? Did I say B wasn't a possibility? Yeah. So you can
yeah.
always do
Time I
this in
got
that little
to,
virtual notepad up there too.
oh, perfect. Okay.
Yep.
And that's like in the little, like a sidebar kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So have you done practice exams, or are you talking about the actual exam that you've taken before?
The actual exam. I bought
Okay.
some
Yeah.
practice exams, but they don't seem like they're anything like the exam.
They should be. So they should be.
Okay.
On the right hand side, you will have like a contents and then the calculator and things like that. There should
Uh-huh.
be a notepad option in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on
Awesome.
that virtual notepad, like I said, sometimes if like we've kind of talked about that visual reminder of don't choose B because it's got a little X next to it.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. That was a good question. Any other questions that anybody can think of on this win, or to kind of follow up on what Heather was asking? Okay. Number 8. So 70-year-old female patient presents with a complaint of the left knee with weight-bearing activities. She is also developing pain at rest. She denies any recent injuries, and there is pain with stair climbing and startup pain. AP lateral and sunrise views of the left knee are ordered and interpreted, and the diagnosis is left knee pain secondary to underlying primary degenerative arthritis. So, process of elimination, you've got two that have M17.12, two that have M17. Let's go to those codes. M17.12. So M17.12 is unilateral primary osteoarthritis. And then M17.9 is osteoarthritis of the knee. So M17.12 for the unilateral primary, or M17.9 for unspecified osteoarthritis. Yep, the M17.12. So we are going to rule out M17.9. What I meant to do. So now we need to decide, are we only coding M17.12, or are we going to also code the M25.561? So if you want to go look at the M25.561, that is for pain in the right knee. So are we going to code the pain as well as the degenerative arthritis? No. Yep. Because that's going to be considered that sign or symptom or the inherited symptom within the condition. So we should only code the primary osteoarthritis. Any questions on that one?
So the sign or symptoms are going to be CPT.
No, we're not going to code the sign or symptom because we can assume that if somebody has degenerative arthritis, they're going to be experiencing pain, right?
Oh,
So if we
okay.
were to code the sign or symptom, then that would just kind of be a redundancy. So we have that
Oh,
guideline that
gotcha.
tells us that if we don't have a definitive diagnosis, then we can code the signs and symptoms. But in
I
this
gotcha.
case, we do, so we would only code the definitive diagnosis.
Okay.
Okay. And then our CPT codes are going to be the X-rays that are ordered, the AP, the lateral, and the sunrise views of the X-rays.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good question. Any other questions or thoughts on that one? Okay. Number 9, a 40-year-old woman who is 25 weeks pregnant with her second child is seeing her obstetrician. She's worried about decreased fetal movement, and during the exam, the obstetrician detects bradycardia within the fetus. So what ICD-10-CM codes are we going to report? So if we are examining mom, right, we should not be putting P codes or the chapter 16 codes for the baby on the mom's chart, right? So we should be able to rule out letter C because we know that if mom is still pregnant, we are coding it as a complication of the pregnancy, not an actual perinatal period condition for the baby. Does that make sense? Okay. So then our little trick of 25 weeks pregnant's not going to work in this one because they all have Z3A.25, right? We have 2 Z codes that we can use to rule out, or we can use 036.8320 and 036.8390. So let's go to the O codes because I think the O codes is what people struggle with the most. So let's go to the 036.8320 and 8390. So 036.8320. Crystal, if you have the AAPC 2024, it's on page 944. So the 832 is going to be the only one that's there. And then we have to use our applicable 7th character for that, and it's not directly above it. So we have to go back to the 036 category that's on page 943. And then since it is a single gestation, meaning there's not multiple fetuses, we're going to use the 07th character for not applicable. So 036.8320 is for maternal care for abnormalities of the fetal heart rate or rhythm in the second trimester. And then 8390 would be for an unspecified trimester. So are they telling us what trimester we're in? Any thoughts? Do we know what trimester they're in?
Yes, the 25 weeks.
Right. So even though they're not telling us specifically second trimester, because we have our 25 weeks, then we can figure out our trimesters. Now, if your brain does not remember what weeks or what trimesters, if you go to the very beginning of your chapter 15 codes, before your code set even starts at the very top of your page, then there's a red notes section that tells you trimesters are counted from the first day of the last menstrual period, and they are defined as follows. Your first trimester is less than 14 weeks. Your second trimester is 14 weeks to less than 28 weeks. And then your third trimester is 28 weeks. So we know that 25 weeks is going to fall within that second trimester. So Sarah, it's going to be a 0 because you're only going to use the seventh character 1 if there are multiple gestations. So if you read above your seventh character options, you read that paragraph, then it says seventh character 0 is for single gestations, and then multiple gestations where the fetus is unspecified. So because in this scenario, because there's only a single fetus, they're not pregnant with twins or triplets or quadruplets, then our 0 is going to mean that the multiple gestations or the number of fetuses is not applicable, because if we only have one, it doesn't matter which one we're doing. Okay. So we know that it's going to be the 036.8320 because, again, it's our second trimester. And then we need to decide, do we need Z33.1 or do we need 009.522? So let's go look at the 009 again, because I think the O codes kind of trip a lot of people up. So let's go look at the 009.522. That way we can just get familiar with those code descriptions. O09.522 is going to be for supervision of elderly multigravida second trimester. So do we think that we need to use 009.522? Does everybody know when you would consider them elderly, primigravida, and multigravida? Does everybody know the weeks that we start to consider them quote unquote elderly?
No.
I want to say 35.
Yep. Yep, it is 35 years. If you don't remember, underneath of the 009.5, at least in the AAPC version of it, there is a note that states pregnancy for a female 35 years and older at the expected date of delivery. So if you don't remember, then that note's there for you. If it's not in the Optums or other versions, then go ahead and write that note in there, because I don't know how those other versions are laid out. But there's just that visual reminder that for your elderly pregnancies, or also known as geriatric pregnancies, I know that term drives me crazy, but if they are 35 years or older, you are considered geriatric pregnancy or an elderly pregnancy. You have it in the Optum, Dawn? Good. Okay. I don't know that I've seen an Optum book in forever. So I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't tell you what notes are in those. Okay. So we do need to use the 009.522. So that's going to give us letter D. Dawn, can you let Crystal know where it is in the Optum? Is it directly underneath of that 009.5 subcategory? Okay, page 892. If you have the AAPC version, then it's on page 929. Okay. Question number 10, we're going to continue with the pregnancy trend. So at 39 weeks gestation, we have a 26-year-old woman who is admitted for precipitous labor and then vaginally delivers a healthy baby girl. So what ICD-10 codes are we reporting on the maternal record? So this, again, is very important to know that we're reporting on the maternal record. This should be an O, not a 0. Okay. So if we have 2 that have 080, actually we technically have 3 that have 080. It's just not in the first, it's not in the first location. And then we have 3 that have 062.3. So 080, let's go look at 080. O80 is for an encounter for full term uncomplicated delivery. So if they are in precipitous labor, that is not going to be considered an uncomplicated delivery. Okay. So 080, we're not going to use 080. So since we have 3, yes, 080 cannot be used with any other codes in chapter 15 as well. Yep. So at least by using that, if we still weren't 100% sure, we at least know that it cannot be B and D, right? So if we weren't 100% sure that 080 was not going to be included for precipitous labor, we do have that note in there that says that 080 cannot be used with any other chapter 15 code. So no other 15 codes. So we can rule out B and D. And then we can look and say, do we need 062.3? Or even if we think it's 080, we can go confirm Z38.00 or Z37.0. So let's just go look at the 062.3. Okay. So look at it real quick. And that's for the precipitate labor. So again, here's our precipitous labor. 062.3 is going to be the precipitous labor. So that's going to tell us that it's not 080 if we were questioning. Carmen, I only have the AAPC version, so I'm not sure what you have, but it should be on page 952 if you have the AAPC version. Okay, any other questions on number 10? Okay, number 11, 43-year-old female presents to the provider for a diabetic ulcer of the right ankle. So we have L97.319 in all 4. So that should be a hint that we don't even have to go look up the L code. They're testing us to see if we know what diabetes code or what E code we should be using. Okay. So let's go look at E11.9. Now, if you're familiar enough with diabetes codes, then you know that E11.9 is just your type 2 diabetes that's uncomplicated, right? But technically, your skin ulcers are going to be considered a complication. So we can rule out E11.9. But we also know that we can rule out letter D because we know we need the diabetic code with the skin ulcer. So we shouldn't only code letter D. Do those two make sense? Okay. So should we report the diabetes code first, or should we report the skin ulcer of the right ankle first? Which one should we sequence first?
Would it be the skin ulcer?
Okay. What's making you think it should be the skin ulcer?
Because that's probably the major problem why they're being seen.
Okay. So if you look at the E11.622, okay, let's go just look at that code description real quick. E11.622, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to find it here too as well. E11.622 is going to be your diabetes
Yeah, I
with
just
other
found it.
skin. Yep. And
Yeah.
then there's a use additional code note. Yep.
Ah,
So that's telling us that our sequencing should be the skin ulcer second, and then your diabetes code first. So when in doubt, always look and see if you have sequencing instructions in your tabular.
thanks. That's a great tip.
Yep, you're welcome. Absolutely. Okay. We went through them fairly quickly tonight. But this, I wanted to kind of go through everything process of elimination tonight versus doing some from scratch, because I wanted to show you guys, because I know a lot of you all are really concerned about timing. Okay. Now, had we not sat and had conversations around all of these, we probably would have been able to do 10 multiple choices in like 20 minutes, right? So that just goes to show that you really, if you're doing your process of elimination correctly, that will help increase your time. You do not have to always go to your index, your alphabetic index, and look up your main term and then go verify it in the tabular, right? So that can slow you down. Now, if you are strong enough in your alphabetic index, then you could potentially find your answers a lot quicker than fumbling through and trying to decide, is it these two? Is it these two? Is it one or the other? Type thing. Sometimes your alphabetic index, because I've been doing this for so long, I am strong enough in my alphabetic index that for me, I can find my codes in the index faster, right? Whereas until you guys get comfortable with them, your process of elimination is probably going to be what's going to be where your speed's going to be. So that's why I always like to show you guys a little bit of both to see that process of elimination is good, but we still need to know real world, because we aren't going to have those 4 answers in the real world to guide us where we need to go. We'll have obviously our documentation, but we do still need to make sure that we have our, ability to find codes when those codes aren't given to us. Any questions that you guys can think of? We have about 10 minutes. Any questions that you guys can think of that you guys want to chat about just from a general standpoint?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you were saying on the practice exam from the AAPC that it should include like a timer and the note thing, right?
Correct. Yep, it should.
Okay, because I spent like $700 on the practice exams with some exams, and like for some reason I'm struggling with them, so I had to spend money on other ones to help me, because all their practice questions have like, I would say 1 to 3 codes, but then the exam actually has like 6 or something. So it doesn't seem very compatible to the actual exam. Is that normal?
They should be fairly similar. I mean,
Okay.
obviously they're not going to be able to give you exactly, like exactly how it's going to be. So they should be similar. You should be able to use your process of elimination. So I know a
Okay.
lot of people say, but like in this scenario, I don't have two options that have the exact same code, right? If you if you have some that are close, go look at the ones that are close because
Okay.
chances are it's going to be one of those two. I'm not saying every single time, but chances are
Okay.
it's going to be one of those two because they are so close in nature. They're seeing if you're paying attention to the details that differentiate each of those codes apart. Um, so
Okay.
try to do that process of elimination. I trust me, I know I have horrible test anxiety. So I get
Yeah.
it when you're like, I'm used to only seeing three, and then now I see six, and I just totally like spaz out, right?
Uh-huh.
Next week, if you join next week, I know for a fact that there are some questions for next week that have like 7 and 8 ICD-10 codes in a single question.
Awesome. Okay.
So I will kind of go through a little bit of how to process of eliminate those as well.
Okay.
Um, because like I said, there's typically going to be one very obvious incorrect answer. And then it's going to also help knowing some of these tips and tricks that I'm showing you guys, like the weeks of gestation, right? In this
Yeah, that was
scenario, your
awesome.
weeks of gestation isn't gonna like really matter because it's in all four. But like in the one that we had up here, your weeks of gestation, then we could easily eliminate one, then we could eliminate another because we knew that the chapter 15 code had to be listed first, right? And then we had to know that our triplets is technically going to be that complication. So without even opening up our code book, if you know those like little tips and things, and because there's a lot of them that I'm going to be sharing over the next couple of weeks. So just kind of like keep in mind those and see if that will help you timing wise and to be a little bit more confident on the answers that you choose.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. So, Carmen, yes, the replay is going to be available. It will be on YouTube either later on this evening or first thing in the morning. Are you in either the Discord group or I'm assuming you found us either on Facebook or the Discord group? Then we will have the link to that posted in both of those places. So, yes, the replay will be available on YouTube. Hang on. I thought I saw another question in the chat. Let me scroll.
I did have a question, but I didn't get to put it in the chat.
No, you're fine, Terry. Go ahead.
So my question is, I've started this before. I started when it was ICD-9, and I took, courses, but I never took the exam. So being fresh, I just finished my actual course again, and now I'm preparing myself. What do you recommend far as like preparing for the actual exam? Like, what do you recommend starting with?
How long has it been since you took your course?
It's only been a couple weeks, so I'm still fresh.
Okay. Okay. I was going to say, because I know some people have said before, I've taken a course and it was like 4 years ago. So I wanted to make sure what I was about to say actually applied to you.
Yeah.
So,
also too, I've had experience in billing. I work in billing. I've been doing medical billing for like 30 years. And it's crazy because even though I'm just starting, it's like I'm learning all over again, even though I have the experience.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. Cause I'm sure that and you've experienced that you thought you knew a little bit more than you knew.
Yes. And
right?
I don't. And I don't know.
Very quickly realize that billing is only the tip of the iceberg into the coding world. So, so what I would suggest, who did you do school with? Was it an AAPC course?
It was not, it was a college course, but everything went through the AAPC. So I'm actually a member and everything.
Perfect. I always like to make sure that if it was a college program that didn't use AAPC material, then my answer would be a little bit different too. So
the only thing is we use, she chose Optum. She didn't get the AAPC books.
Okay.
She chose the Optum because that's what she said she liked or whatever. But we do have the access to some of the study guides and stuff because of,
Good.
have the AAPC membership. So
Yeah, perfect. So that was going to be my thing, was purchase the study guide. But if you don't already have,
okay.
if you already have that, the next thing that I would suggest is to do practice exams, whether you have access to them. If I don't know if they supplied you with any of them.
Oh, well,
The
we had
Legacy
purchased,
website.
yeah,
Go ahead.
we had to purchase them. Yeah, we purchased, well, I purchased a set, but I was thinking
Okay.
about back and just purchase the other one because it's 3 different sets, I believe. So I only purchased like A, B, and C, I think. So I'll
Yes.
probably go back and try to purchase the other ones just to get familiar.
Yes. So keep in mind, there are technically 9 practice exams. On
Okay.
the AAPC website, you will only be able to get 6. You will only be able to get, yes, Chris, I was actually getting ready to say that. You will only be able to get A, B, C, and then D, E, F on the AAPC site.
Okay.
Legacy actually has 3 additional practice exams that they only give to AAPC approved partners.
Okay.
And those are 1 through 3. So
Okay.
you can purchase those additional if you feel like you need help. Now, I
Yeah.
will tell you because, and Crystal, don't freak out whenever I say this. I will tell you that they do get more difficult the higher that you get. Okay.
Okay.
So A is going to be the easiest. B is going to
Oh,
be just a smidge harder. C is going to be a little bit harder.
okay.
D,
Okay.
again, as you go in sequential order, they are going to get a little bit more difficult. Now, 1, 2, 3 is going to be a beast. Okay. I have heard so many students, and I mean, even students of Legacy, they say, I thought I had a handle on this, and then I did 1 through 3, and they scored a little bit lower because they are a little bit more specialized, a little bit more difficult.
Right.
However, if you can at least get a 70-75% on 1 through 3, then you're going to walk into your exam and think that your CPC exam is a piece of cake. Okay. Because they walk in prepared for 1 through 3, and then they get more than likely easier questions. And you're not going to see the harder questions and kind of have that brain freeze of, holy cow, this is a really hard question, because you've already kind of prepared for it if you do 1 through 3.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for that advice.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I do recommend, and this is obviously like, I feel like I'm pitching myself a little bit, and I'm like the worst salesperson for myself. But I will say, if you need help book prep wise, I don't know kind of like what your instructor encouraged and kind of like taught like how to prep your books and things along those lines.
Well, she didn't. I'm sorry to cut you off. She
No.
didn't. I'm the one who started looking into stuff like that. So I actually bought the tabs and I tabbed the book out, but I haven't started writing anything. Like, okay, because the course was only 4 months. It should have been longer, but whatever. Anyhow, I told her to tab her book out. She bought the tabs because I said I was tabbing, but I still haven't like decided on trying to really make the notes in the book. I have really crappy handwriting. And so it's just like, I cringe to like start writing in my book and it just looks ugly.
Right.
So
look at the book prep that we have on Legacy website. There's a couple sample pages with each one of them that'll kind of give you an idea of whether or not that's going to help your brain process the information. So that's one thing to do. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me lately about tabbing. If you are not, do you have kind of like a deadline of when you want to take your exam?
I want to take it before the year is out, like really. Really.
Okay. Yeah. No, as long as it's not next week, because, and here's the thing, if you haven't tabbed your book and then you tab your book today and then take your exam next week, the tabs are going to slow you down. Okay. And that's only because you're not going to have time to get familiar enough with the tabs. Now, I am a huge proponent of not tabbing, and it's not because I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. It's not because I know my books well enough that it does slow me down, yes, but our students typically learn that book inside and out. So therefore, they don't have to rely on that tab to get to the 30,000 series. They
Right.
kind of know the sequential order of the book, and they know that
Mm-hmm.
ENF's at the beginning, medicine's at the end, all of those things. So
Okay.
I have a love-hate relationship with tabs. In
Oh,
the
okay. I wish I would have known
learning
that before.
aspect, right. In the learning aspect, and as you're going through the course, tabs are good because they help you learn the layout of the book, right?
Right.
But if you know your book so well, then for me, like I've been doing this for so long, tabs
Right.
get in my way. They're bulky. They annoy me. I want to rip them off. Like it drives me crazy. Right. But 15, 17 years ago when I started, then I tabbed my books because I thought that's, because everybody was a huge proponent of it. Right. But now that I have been teaching for so long, and I've noticed the students that have the tabs, and I'm not saying every single person, right? Because I don't want to make that blanket statement. But I've noticed that a lot of the students and people that tab their books rely on them very heavily to find a section, and they don't truly know their
Know the
book.
Right.
Like
And that's
the
my
back of their
concern too, that I really want to dive in. I've been just having a little bit of family things going on, so I haven't really been as studious.
No, I get
This
it.
is
Yeah.
why I wanted to get in, and I tried 2 weeks ago to get in with you guys, and I could not get in. I was totally freaking out. So my son helped me tonight, and I'm like, thank you, because I couldn't understand why I couldn't pull it up, and I'm like going through my phone, I'm going to the tablet, I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah, this
Zoom likes
really
to throw
great.
its little temper tantrums too, so it wouldn't surprise me if your Zoom was having one of those
I
because
think
mine
I
does.
was, because it kept telling me like a error, and then finally I went back to Facebook and clicked it, and it popped in. I was like, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, so those are my suggestions. You can always shoot me a message if you want to kind of
Okay.
chat a little bit more about, like more specialized and things.
Yes.
So don't hesitate to reach out if you do have any questions that you want to.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm definitely glad I found this group, because I definitely needed it. We started out with a class of maybe like 15 people, and by the end, I think it was like 3 of us left. And then some of the other girls that are texting, they're like, they just don't think they're going to be able to make it. And I'm like, listen, I didn't come this far not to have that attitude.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pass this test. I don't want to hear nothing about not passing.
Yep. And trust me, the first time I took my exam back in 2007, I did not pass. So just because I may seem like I know what I'm doing today, because trust me, I have some days where I question everything too. But it's one of those things that everybody's got to have a beginning, right? And I have found that you have to practice and consistency is what's really going to solidify it in your brain versus you sitting here listening to me talk. That's why I'm saying go to this, do this, read this, those types of things. So don't be too hard on yourself. And I've had a lot of people say, well, how is that supposed to know that? Well, if you knew that, you wouldn't be in class, right? You would know it, and you wouldn't be having to learn it. So you just have to give yourself some grace as you're learning it too. Yeah. That's kind of like my motto right now. And I've said that so many times over the last couple of weeks. My husband's probably like, if you tell one more person that you have to give yourself grace, like, but it's just kind of one of those things that, you do, because while you're learning, and if you're like me, like you expect to pick it up super quick. And whenever you don't, you get frustrated and you feel defeated. So you just got to keep pushing.
I used to have the problem of when I got a test and it wasn't an A, like I would fight tooth and nail to go back and get that A. I'm over it. As long as it's passing now, I'm good.
I hear you. Yes.
Okay, well, I won't hold you any longer. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I really appreciate this. Is great information for me. Now I'm really just going to go ahead and get in practice. I still have access to Cengage. That's what we use to study. So I'm going to go ahead and keep banging out those practice quizzes I have with them, and between the study guides and stuff that I have. But this was great information. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You are very welcome. Like I said, reach out if you need anything.
Okay, awesome.
And then Carmen, if you want to reach out to me too, because I know that you kind of put in the chat that you've got a little bit of a deadline. So reach out to me and we can try to come up with a plan for you as well. Okay. All right. If anybody needs anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, great. We have a meeting already Saturday morning. Perfect. If anybody needs anything before we meet next week, then don't hesitate to reach out. Facebook, email, Discord group, all of the things. All right. I will chat with everyone next week, and you guys have a good rest of your week and weekend. Have a great one. Thanks.